their careers, and in 2023 I completed an ICF accredited diploma in coaching. So in hearing I run a studio, you might think I've always worked in UX, but I actually didn't start my UX journey until 2018. I then went from UX newbie to an established figure on the UX scene in less than 2 years. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I know how hard it can feel for people to progress their careers, as I get contacted all the time by people who are trying to do that exact thing. So I want to share with you the strategies I found that worked the best, and my examples are all from the world of UX, but these strategies could really be used by anyone. Okay. And if you have any questions, I think we'll have time at the end. Okay, so before we start, just to set some expectations, here are the things that I won't talk about. I won't talk about CVs. I won't talk about portfolios, and I won't talk about interview techniques. So whilst super important for certain types of roles, there's already a lot of material out there on how to do those things. If you think of them like a foundation, you need them, but they're not what's going to progress your career. So you're probably now wondering what I'm actually going to talk about. Okay. So here's what I'll actually talk about, which is basically my own UX journey. And in true UX style, I've made it into a customer journey map, which is a tool we use at the analysis stage of the UX process to visually show how a customer is feeling, how they move when they move through the journey. So number one, I got started by creating a personal brand. And two, I got qualified. And three, with my personal brand in place and a qualification in progress, I started networking. And through networking, I found a mentor. And then I leveled up by gaining the supercharging power of public speaking. Ooh, tremor through the room. Okay, so, but before we get into that, I'll give you a bit of background about why I decided to make the move into UX. So in just 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, I completely transformed my life. I went from sitting in a job and a career I didn't love to actually finding my calling and getting excited to wake up every day. So what happened to kick off my midlife career crisis? Well, when I gave birth to my daughter at age 39, a strange thing happened. Rather than playing it safe in a job that I'd been in for a few years while I navigated the challenges of early motherhood, I went into overdrive. All of a sudden, my time became very precious indeed. I'd gone back to work 3 days a week after a year off on maternity, and if I was going to spend those 3 days away from my new baby, it was going to have to be worth it, and it wasn't. I had a little girl now. I wanted to set a good example of how to live a fulfilling life. I wanted to show her how to follow her dreams and find her calling. But how could I do that if I didn't even know what my calling was? I'd spent years just doing what I thought I was good at, thinking that that was what you were supposed to do, while not really knowing what it was that I should be doing. And I envied people who really knew what they wanted to do. I was really good at English at school and I love reading, so that's what I did at university. So when I left uni, I looked for a job where I could use my skills. Information design fitted nicely. It was language related and it required a brain that's wired 50-50 logic and creative, and that's exactly what I have. Unfortunately, information design was print-based, which was a dying industry. It was also very specific to the role, to the company that I was working for. So I stepped sideways. So to progress, I moved into project management. I did that for a while, but then I missed doing something creative. So I moved into marketing. It was better, but I still didn't like it as much as my information design job. Then I met my husband, who was the creative director at a digital design agency. And he listened to me talking about my old information design job and how much I liked it. And he said, you should do UX, to which I replied, what's that? So UX, or user experience, is a household name now, but it wasn't back then. At that time, virtually no one had heard of it, and companies certainly didn't have UX departments. And now virtually every company you can think of has a UX team. So when I looked up UX, I fell in love with it immediately. This was my calling. It was strategic, it involves problem solving, it requires the 50-50 logic creative split. It's current, and it's lots and lots of fun. I was totally hooked. So I'd finally found what I should be doing after nearly 40 years. But now that I knew what I wanted to do, how should I go about getting there? So I started by building my personal brand. So I didn't know the first thing about the UX world, or changing careers for that matter. I'd been sitting in my comfy little corporate nest for the last 18 years. I didn't know anyone in the outside world, and no one knew me. I hadn't even been aware there was an outside world up until that point. I had a LinkedIn page and a Twitter account, or an X account, but I rarely touched either. I had a handful of connections on both, mostly people I knew, but I'd never actually posted anything. My LinkedIn profile was very basic and very neglected. So I knew I needed to get my house in order before I started putting myself out there. So I read a few articles on how to create a good LinkedIn profile and set about rewriting it. So once I had that in place, I got a few trusted friends to review it, and then I updated it with their feedback. So next stop was my profile picture, which I got my husband to retake in our hall, so it would have a plain white background. That one's the second from the right. It wasn't a professional shot, but it was a good start. And it reflected the personal brand that I wanted to project. I've since replaced that with the professional shot on the far right. And the ones on the left are just to illustrate the types of shots you definitely shouldn't use. So you can always tell when somebody's been cropped out ahead of time, or it's just the nicest photograph that they have of themselves. So once I had dressed my shop front, I set about surrounding myself with all things UX. So this was not just about educating myself, but also about making sure that if anyone looked at my profiles, they'd see I was immersed in the UX world, okay? So I Googled lists of top UX designers and started following them on Twitter or X. I joined related groups on LinkedIn and started sending invites. I joined Medium and started reading UX related content. I then also followed those people on Medium and Twitter and got myself onto any UX related mailing list that I could find. And I started listening to UX podcasts. So eventually, my news feeds and my inboxes began filling up with all things UX, and I was starting to kind of find my feet. The next step was to put myself out there. But how should I sound? I didn't have a clue what my personal brand was. So I did some soul searching. I went to a section on personal brands that said your personal brand should be the 3 words that you'd like people to say about you when you're not there. So that's a nice start. I then learned from my life coach that your personal brand should match your core values. So apparently people get a bit off kilter when the job they're doing doesn't reflect what they believe in. So I was a classic example. So when I started in information design all those years ago, I always wanted to learn the trade and then take my skills off to work for a charity. Then I fell into project management and marketing, and somewhere along the way I forgot about my dream. So through my life coach, I did a values exercise to draw out my core values, and that helped me refocus. The first UX job I got was working for a tech for good startup called Sustainably, and it was perfect. If anyone would like a copy of these value exercises. I actually have my own one now. That's the one that I used before, but I've got my own one now. I'm happy to share that with you. So just connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM and I'll pass you one. It really is a really useful exercise. So I now had my personal brand in place that reflected my core values. I was going to be knowledgeable, helpful and inspirational. But what would be the best way for me to get my brand out there into the community? Through a bit of research, I decided that creating helpful content was going to be the way forward for me. But what should I write about? I needed to keep in mind that people would be reading my content for them and not for me. No one cares if I went to a conference yesterday, but telling them about the most useful thing I learned there, now that's different. Now there's something in it for them. So I did just that and started small. If I read something useful, I would write a quick post about it. If I went to a great session, I would summarise the main learning point and post about that. And people responded well, as they were able to learn something new, even though they didn't attend the session themselves. The content was also supporting my brand by coming across as knowledgeable, helpful, and inspirational. So once I had established my voice, I moved on to long form content. To do that, I drew on my personal experience. What had I learned that could help people bypass the effort I had exerted in learning it myself? One of the first articles I wrote was about how I got my first UX job in just 4 months. And the next one I wrote was about how I spent a year getting over my fear of public speaking. So all of this was great, but I still didn't have any tangible UX experience under my belt. How would anyone take me seriously if I had never actually done the job? So I knew I needed to get some kind of qualification to give me credibility. So moving on to getting qualified. So this was the fastest way for me to build credibility when I was just starting out. And as if by magic, I was contacted by an amazing company you'll probably have heard of, called the UX Design Institute, that I'd done a 2-day introduction to UX course with the year before. And they were launching at the time their new online university accredited diploma course and wanted to offer me a place. So this was a chance I'd been looking for. I accepted their offer and literally chucked out of my job the next day. The diploma took me 4 months to complete and is still one of the best things I've ever done. The structure of the course was perfect. It took a single project through the full UX lifecycle on desktop and mobile. So by the time I got to the end, I not only felt like I'd done the job, I had the beginnings of a portfolio as well. So this was a massive confidence boost and gave me the courage to actually approach potential employers. If anyone's interested in learning more about UX, I've got a cracking discount code, 50% off for the full diploma price. So if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, you can hunt me down on LinkedIn and I'll have a pack of stuff, useful stuff that I can send you. So doing the qualification really helped open doors and gave me a bit of credibility, especially when I didn't have any experience yet. But how was I going to find out about the opportunities that were out there? And that's where networking came in. But before we get into that, we'll take a quick look at how my customer journey map was progressing. I had my personal brand in place and I'd started working on my qualification. So now that I looked and sounded like I knew what I was talking about, I was ready to get out there and find my tribe. So you've heard of location. Well, the career equivalent is network. I don't know about you, but when I thought about networking in the past, I thought about a bunch of guys in suits standing around drinking and swapping business cards. So it turns out it's nothing like that. There was a whole world of like amazing networking opportunities out there. I just needed to know where to look. And once I got started, it grew very organically. Networking for me has been an absolute game changer. In the first 4 months as a UX student, I went to more catch-ups, meetups, and conferences than I'd done in the rest of my career put together. It really worked. Once I started looking for groups in my area, I was surprised by how many were out there and holding regular meetups. I got myself onto Meetup, Eventbrite, LinkedIn, Twitter or X, and any other tool where I thought my dream team would be hanging out. I also joined Women in Banking and Finance, who I'm still a mentor for, the Facebook group UX in Scotland, FinTech Scotland, Girl Geek Scotland, UX Edinburgh and UX Glasgow. I started going to conferences like UX Scotland, Accessibility Scotland, Service Design and Government, Turing Fest, and Women in Tech. If I met anyone interesting or influential there, I would hunt them down on LinkedIn and ask if they had time for a coffee and a chat. And by networking in person, I got to know my community, and more importantly, they got to know me. I heard about more events, I made more connections, and I also got the chance to throw my hat in the ring if any opportunities came up. Within a few months, I had found my feet. I had a solid network consisting of relevant people. I had my finger on the pulse as far as hot topics in UX went. And as I'll move on to next, I had a couple of amazing new mentors. So back to my journey. And I looked and sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And now I'd found my tribe through networking. But who could help me navigate this new world and find out more about the opportunities that were out there? And that's where mentoring came in. So my mentoring journey actually started back in 2017, a few years before I changed careers. I just turned 41, I'll leave you to do the maths. And I just returned to work from maternity part-time, 3 days a week. So why did I choose to seek out a mentor? I'm sure some of this will sound familiar to some. I felt like my career wasn't progressing as quickly as it should. I was extremely overqualified for what I was doing, and no one around me seemed to mind or care. The company I was working for had gone through a massive restructure, which resulted in all the avenues for development being shut down. And basically, no teams were hiring and no one was getting promoted. I was knocking my pan in, getting nowhere, and with no prospect of getting anywhere anytime soon. And in short, I was over it. So something I learned very recently that I wish I'd learned in my 20s is that if you're the hardworking girl in the office who diligently plows through more work than everyone else combined, you don't get noticed. All you get is more work. And I didn't learn that until I was 42. So I felt like I needed a champion, like someone who would recognize all the hard work I was putting in and would help me open doors. I decided to ask my line manager for a mentor, and to his credit, he found me the perfect one, and that was the start of my mentoring journey. I saw just how powerful having a mentor could be. So when I switched careers, I knew I needed a mentor in the UX industry. And it was actually at the UX Glasgow Meetup that I met one of my current mentors. So why did I ask her in particular to mentor me? As I said before, my husband had set up a design studio after leaving his job a few months before I left mine. and I was considering joining the family business after I finished my diploma. And my current mentor runs her own digital transformation business in Glasgow, so she was the perfect fit for my next chapter. I needed advice on how to set up a business, and I needed contacts, and she had both. I'd already heard about her through my husband, as he really rated her, and I was so impressed by her at the UX Glasgow Meetup that I emailed her after the event and asked if she would consider mentoring me. She said she would be delighted, as she was just about to add mentoring into her training program, and it would be a good opportunity to see things from the other side. I arranged monthly catch-ups with her, where I would take the time to go into her office in Glasgow, and she would very kindly chat to me for a couple of hours. So our initial catch-ups were very much about technical things, and she would give me really clear pointers about who I needed to speak to and the types of things I should be doing, including how to get work. And as time went on and I became much more established, i.e. I needed her business advice less and less, our catch-ups became much more informal. I mean, I chat about all sorts of things, but she still keeps an eye out for opportunities for me, which I'll come on to later. I could go on and on about how mentoring has helped my career, but here are just 3 examples. So mentoring got me my first UX job. So when I left my job to do the UX diploma, my first mentor put me in touch with a contact she had at a design agency. And when I met with the contact, they said there were some workshops with FinTech Scotland they'd like to get me involved in. And the workshops never materialised, but the guys from FinTech Scotland put me in touch with Sustainably, who was a startup at the time, and they hired me as UX lead. Mentoring got me into meetups, which opened up a lot of opportunities. My current mentor introduced me to someone who is now my kind of unofficial UX mentor. And she really took me under her wing and suggested some great meetups for me to attend, some of which have had a dramatic effect on my career, including giving me loads of opportunities to speak in public, which brings me to my 3rd example. Mentoring got me invited to speak at large-scale tech conferences. After a discussion with my current mentor about public speaking, I then spent a year actively trying to get over my fear of it, which I'll come on to shortly. And at the end of that year, 2019, I was contacted by Agile Scotland to speak at their conference. And I later discovered my current mentor had been chatting to one of the organisers and had given them my name. So speaking at Agile Scotland opened up several opportunities, and since then I've been invited to speak at Women in Tech in Scotland, UX Scotland, Lean Agile Scotland, Agile on the Beach, Thrive Fest Global, and UCP Gathering. But getting to the stage where I was comfortable speaking at conferences wasn't easy. It took me a year of consistently pushing myself out of my comfort zone to get there, but it was totally worth it. So I was now on the final stretch of my journey. I looked and sounded like a thoroughbred UXer. I was surrounded by my tribe, and I had some amazing new mentors to help me. It was time to level up. So public speaking, I get it. If you told me a few years ago that I'd be speaking at large-scale tech conferences and I'd actually be excited about it, I would have laughed in your face. Seriously, I was absolutely terrified of it. We've all been there, that feeling of absolute dread when someone says, so we'd like you to present at the session next week. You're like, There's a reason it's the number one thing that people name as their greatest fear, and I was no exception. But what I realised more and more when I changed careers was that public speaking has become a career differentiator, and that my career had suffered as a result of avoiding it. In other words, I needed to start doing it. But I didn't just want to do it, I wanted to feel really comfortable doing it. So I spent a whole year employing various techniques to get over my fear. And I kept a note of my journey. And the tips I'll talk about are the culmination of courses I went on, events I went to, books, blogs, and articles that I read, life coaching, and good old personal experience. And the results were astounding. Like, if networking built my UX career, then public speaking supercharged it. I went from being known to being quite well known and having much more credibility. So I'd like to share with you my fast track to public speaking and the 7 things that made the biggest difference to me. So, neuroplasticity. I actually reprogrammed my brain. I started with affirmations every day, sometimes several times a day, and definitely every time I thought about public speaking. Affirmations are just short phrases you repeat to yourself out loud, like I am brave. And I chose positive forms like I'll be confident over negative forms like I won't be nervous, to ensure that it's the positive image that I conjured up. As soon as I felt the nerves kicking in, I'd repeat these phrases in my head 3 times. I did this at least once a day over the course of a few months. And on top of that, I would smile. And slowly but surely, I was creating new connections between brain cells and redirecting my brain away from my limiting beliefs. So breathing, this is a big one. So in the past, when I thought about public speaking, my heart would race and I'd feel as if like a hand was like closing in around my throat. And apparently that's adrenaline. So adrenaline was restricting my breathing, which was making me feel panicky. And feeling panicky would create more adrenaline, and it's like a vicious cycle. To get to this realization, I did this exercise. I sat with my eyes closed and my feet flat on the floor. And I imagined getting up on the stage. What did I feel like? Where were the nerves affecting my body? And it was in my neck. So I isolated that spot and remembered that feeling, and then redirected my breath away from my neck and into my tummy. And tummy breathing with an open mouth and a relaxed stomach opened my throat and calmed my adrenaline. And then I could use the adrenaline rather than working against me. Pick a happy colour. It's a bit out there. I thought this sounded a bit out there when my coach suggested it, but it worked as well. So this time I had to close my eyes, imagine standing at the podium, and then everything just falling into place. In an ideal scenario, people would be listening intently. I would be comfortable, relaxed, and smiling. Everything would be going to plan, and the colour that came to my mind was yellow. And once I had my happy colour, every time I thought about being up there, I imagined everything was like bathed in that colour, and that just kept me feeling positive. So start small. You don't see babies just suddenly up and walk. They crawl first. So I started off by making myself ask questions at events, something I had always avoided. Small events to begin with, and then bigger ones. And then if a speaker was looking for a volunteer, I would put my hand up. And it felt totally unnatural at first, but gradually I got used to it. And in 1 year, I went from asking a question at an informal meetup to speaking at Agile Scotland. And the key was doing it just a little bit at a time. And this is a weird one. I discovered sitting right at the front helped when I was asking questions. I'm still not sure why, but it does. Preparation is a big one. I read somewhere you should do an hour's prep for every 6 minutes you're speaking. In reality, I need to do much more than that. I usually finish writing my talks about a week in advance, and then I practice them out loud over and over again. I found that saying my speech out loud is very different from reading it in my head. It not only helps me work out how to present it, but it gives me the chance to find the words that I'm most likely to stumble over so I can rewrite them. Next up was to find one person and say my talk out loud to them. It seemed like a big step, but that helped me conquer some nerves, and I got some useful feedback on my delivery at the same time. It's too much pressure to try and memorize everything. The fear of forgetting increases your anxiety. So instead, I practiced my content so I knew it inside out, but I kept my notes to hand. And I've seen videos of myself speaking, and I look at my notes way less than I think I do. So, things you can do on the day. I find that holding a power pose for a few minutes before I was about to go on would actually make me feel more confident. I use the superhero, hands on hips, legs shoulder width apart. Once I was up there, I would anchor myself to the floor by standing straight, feet shoulder width apart, and imagine you've got roots like a tree that were spreading down through the body and tethering me to the earth, and that would make me feel grounded. Then put my shoulders back, lifted my chin up, and held the middle finger of the opposite hand to get rid of that like spare hand feeling everybody has. And the last thing I would do would be to smile. Okay, so lastly, visualization. So I was now starting to feel pretty comfortable with public speaking, but I still wasn't like excited about it. And that's where visualization came in. So I needed someone to emulate, and then I found the perfect person. If you haven't seen Queen at Live Aid, it truly is one of the top rock performances of all time. Freddie Mercury is on fire, exuding confidence and pride, obviously prepared, but yet not taking himself too seriously. And those were the 4 attributes that I wanted to have when I was presenting. I could completely relate to them, and all of a sudden, I was excited about speaking in public. And still to this day, anytime I feel a kind of twinge, like I conjure up this image. So I haven't scared you off already. Here's a quick summary of what you can do if you want to fast track your UX career. Get a brand, immerse yourself in UX and align your content to your core values. Get qualified, increase your confidence and credibility by learning the UX process. Get involved, maximize opportunities by finding your tribe and hanging out with them at networking events. Get a mentor. If you meet someone inspirational, ask them to mentor you. And get out there, start small and build up slowly to begin conquering your fear of public speaking. Okay, and I'll finish on a quote. Luck is being prepared for when opportunity presents itself, which is a quote from none other than the Hoff. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, I think we have some time now.
Thanks a lot, Jenny. And yes, part 2 of this session is open to the audience. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Jenny, please just raise your hand, and she'll help out for sure. Any questions in the audience?
I'll leave this up for a second and then stop presenting.
Rekha, go ahead.
Hi, Jenny. Sorry, my camera is playing up. Right, let's put a face on. An evening face. Hi, Jenny. It's reflection. I thought that was really, really interesting. I've had quite a few sort of content roles, 4 different names, and I feel that I'm at a stage where I'm maybe not validate myself, but I do definitely need to upskill myself. And it's very interesting to say that, it doesn't matter where you are at, you've got to keep upskilling yourself to to fit in what's going on currently, if that makes sense. So it's more a reflection for me. So I was trying to connect with you, but I'm not on premium on LinkedIn. So I couldn't message you, but I'll be really interested in some of the stuff, how you've gone through, because I feel that I might be doing something very similar, hopefully in a shortcut way though.
Yeah, send me a connection request and then you can DM me, no problem. I'll answer any questions that you've got.
Thank you. But yeah, it was good. It's just a thought process that, wow, okay, it can happen.
At 100%. Like I coach people all the time, and it really is just like everything is what you make of it. So it's kind of keeping that pressure on, but also don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's like, what's the next most logical thing that you can do to just keep the pressure on? So even if it's just, I read an article today, or I looked at a podcast today, or something like that, just keep that pressure on. I read 2 pages of a book. I got a UX book and I read 2 pages of it. It's just keeping that pressure on all the time, and it makes, over the long term, it just makes such a huge difference.
Thank you.
Awesome. We've got Jenny next.
Hi Jenny, thank you very much for your talk. I think it was really interesting how you said that you match your brand to your values, because I think, especially like, I've got a job now, but when I was at university, they were talking about your personal brand, and I was like, my brand is just that I want a job. That's the basics. So yeah, I suppose, like, how have you used your brand? Is that like the way you present yourself when you're networking? Like, to use it to apply to jobs? Like, yeah, does that make sense?
It's like a filter that you filter absolutely everything through. So I think I would answer all of the above to everything you just said. So when I write content, I write it with that. Like, I only write stuff that's helpful, knowledgeable, and inspirational. Like, I don't write anything else. When I'm doing coaching, that's how I try and present myself. Like, everything goes through that filter. In the studio, we don't take on any work that we don't agree with. So, and we actually actively give discounts to people who are doing something socially responsible or ethical or sustainable. So it's just kind of filtering everything through that brand, if that makes sense. Like, what are my values, and I match everything to that. So, but if you want a copy of the values exercise, then send me a link in the request, and
I
I'll
will
send
do.
it to you.
Thank you.
It's a really interesting exercise.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, no, and I'm doing like a leadership course at work at the moment as well, and like doing all the power pose and like looking at the values and stuff. Yeah, it all aligns, which is good.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So, there's a question in the chat. What kind of advice were you asking when you were trying to connect with people? How did you approach people? So I think this is under the networking category.
Yeah, just keep it relevant. So people love to get asked advice. They do. It's not like, and most of the people who work in our community, like UX people, are just really nice people, and they want to help, and they seem to understand that kind of increasing the water floats all boats. People aren't selfish with their knowledge. People really want to help other people, and especially if you go along to networking events, and whoever the speaker is, get in touch with them and ask them a bit more about what they were talking about, or to make it relevant. So I saw you at, or I heard you talking about this, and then ask them a question about it and ask them their advice. And people are genuinely really, really, really helpful. We're very lucky with our community. I know people who run in other networks, and they're like, oh God, I wish our network was like UX. UX sounds amazing.
I love that quote. Water floats all boats. That's brilliant.
Yeah, increasing the water floats all boats.
That's great.
It's about people being selfish with their knowledge.
Yeah.
That's not going to help anyone. And I'll happily share my knowledge with anyone and give anyone a leg up.
So I have a question for you, Jenny.
Yeah.
It was about the branding. So obviously you run your own company right now. Branding is essential. When you started your career in UX, firstly, was it straight into the business, or did you start with a company and work for a company? And was there a relevancy of having a brand at that point?
Well, a few people have commented on our studio, actually, and that Patrick and I are the brand. The brand isn't Interactive Studio. The brand is Patrick and I. See, obviously he was creative director for like 20 years before he started our studio, and I've built my career since, and through speaking and all the networking stuff that I do. So yeah, I did the UX diploma, and I joined the family business, and then I got a contract job with a startup, and that absolutely reflected my values, because it was called Sustainably, and we were basically doing roundups to charity. So if you bought a coffee or something, we would take the roundups and we would add it to this little pot, and then at the end of the month it gave it to a charity. So 100% tied in with my values and what I wanted to do. So yeah, that was that journey.
Cool. Okay. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Please make use of this time and Jenny's time. Well, if that's not the case, then Jenny's details are on the screen. So if you haven't, take a screenshot. This video, this call has been recorded. I'll upload the video shortly. And if you haven't checked out the UX Brum pages or the links there, or join the community yet, please do so. We're hoping to keep this cadence up throughout the year with more calls and more people joining. And this is, in a way, what Jenny's been talking about as well, building that network and building that support as well. So the more people that you know, the more, I guess, you can progress your career, as it were. So, yeah.
If anyone does have anything, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and I'll answer any questions that people have.
Awesome. All right. Well, in which case, we shall leave it there. And thank you again, Jenny. That was very useful. I've made plenty of notes, and I'll be in touch soon too. But and to everybody else, thanks for joining. Hopefully you found it useful, and we shall catch you on the next one. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.